Welcome once again to From the Studio. I'm author Bob Pierce, and hopefully by now you've made some progress on your project, and I hope these videos have so far also been a help for that. As I'd mentioned in some of the very first videos, I had partnered up with another independent author, a gentleman named Rick Blaisdell. He and I did some live seminars a few years back and helped other people who are independent authors to get their books written. And a couple of people have gotten back in touch with either of us and told us that they have had some success. I just wanted to share one of those with you right now. One of our alumni, a gentleman named Carl Quilitzit, got his book published, Higher Education. He sent me a testimonial and a copy of the book, which is pretty cool. Anyway, Carl says, I just wanted to thank you for the writer's seminar this summer. With material you provided, I was able to get one of my books on Amazon. I used InDesign for the interior pages and Corel Draw for the cover and other illustrations. I'm pretty psyched to see it out there as a real thing. Thanks again. Well, Carl used the information that he learned in our seminars, and these videos include, well, pretty much all of that, as well as some additional things that time did not constrain us from. When you rent a hall, you got to keep it within the time limits you've got to do a seminar. The videos didn't have quite that kind of restriction, so hopefully you're finding what you need in these videos. Now, to review some of the topics we hit on these videos, and just sort of a reminder, one of the first things we talked about were the biggest roadblocks, the first one being making time to write and not just hoping to find time to write, finding a dedicated space someplace to work in, and the nuts and bolts of getting yourself organized, getting your computer files organized, writing in chapters, and approaching the project as a whole project, a whole book, not just a chapter at a time. As I said in the very first video, if you're trying to get that first chapter perfect before moving on, you're never going to move on, because you're never going to get it perfect because you haven't written the rest of it yet. You don't really know where it's going to go yet. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. We also talked about how to find inspirations for stories and how to find inspirations for characters for your stories. Finding different names for your characters, because a character with a name is real to your readers instead of just the guy in the hat or, you know, he said, she said, that sort of thing. If you call them John and Mary and give them a little bit of a backstory, even if not much of it is actually revealed in the book, all of these peripheral characters become real to your readers. We also talked about character development and illustrations and finding or making props to use as photo props for your illustrations, and where to look for some and what sort of things you can do as far as, well, getting away with doing things that look real but you really can't show them to people in the world so you don't get in trouble. A whole thing leading to the idea of creating a product, your book being a product that has a certain element of value tangible to whoever picks it up, so that, you know, they don't know the story. You get a little blurb on the back cover, but they don't know how awesome your story is until they actually read it. So you need to put a product in their hands that really looks and feels like something. And illustrations are one of the biggest ways to go about doing it. We also talked about the psychology of cover design and how important it is to capture someone's attention, to get them to take a look at your book. The cover is how they're going to judge it, especially online, where they're going to scroll through page after page of little thumbnails of pictures of your book covers, and you're in there with a million others, and you're trying to capture somebody's attention long enough to get them to read the description and hopefully click buy me. And one of the things, and just in review, that is the most important and the most powerful way to get someone's attention to a book cover is when the book cover looks back at the reader. Eye contact, faces on the cover. We also talked about sources for getting images, particularly online. Images that are copyright free or public domain or something like that. Something that's inexpensive or out and out free. We did explain too how the different sites work where you can actually buy images and the limitations and the costs that go along with them. And that's pretty important because you don't want to get into any kind of trouble with any sort of copyright infringements. We also talked about working with live models, how to arrange the whole photo shoot, getting photographers and a crew together, locations, or in the studio if your photographer has a studio, and all the different legalities involved with getting releases signed, and the idea that you have creative freedom in doing this sort of thing, but you also want to give that creative freedom to the model and to the photographer. Let them kind of run with it from time to time, because you may be surprised. You may end up with a photo that you weren't expecting, that wasn't part of your shoot list, and something that is going to end up becoming a major part of your book, an illustration, something you use for promotional value, maybe even the cover. And we also talked about doing layout and design. Things to keep in mind about laying out the pages, particularly, well, the aesthetics certainly, but particularly the things that you need to keep in mind when it comes to whatever it is your publishing company is going to require of you. You have to make sure that you have the right margins and the type is big enough for your readers to read, and different considerations, some that are required and some that are optional. In our last video, the one previous to this, gave you a lot of tips on self-publishing as well as how to go about the uploading process. Now, I use a particular service. I use Amazon's Kindle service, and we walked through the stages of that. But there are a lot of others out there, and we talked about those as well. So whoever it is that you end up using, make sure that when you start the project, as you're putting it together, you have in your mind what you're going to need to be able to upload this to the publisher so that it actually works. All of these videos, by the way, are free and on my YouTube channel, Bob's Awesome Books. And you can also go to the Bob's Awesome Books website and find links that'll take you to each one of them. And they're free because I want to encourage you to get your project done. Just as we did with all the live seminars, I want to do this online to a bigger audience of people, and encourage you to. You'll see the email address at the end of this video. If you have any questions, please also feel free to get in touch with me. Now, this whole summer, while I've been making these videos, I have been plodding along, working on my 13th book. And it's been, part of the idea of making time and staying true to that, staying true to the craft of writing, and just keep going. So I've had to make time to do these videos, but I've also made time to stay on track and keep these pages coming. Right now I am on the 21st chapter, I believe, of my first draft, writing bloody, practicing what I preach, and just plowing through. Now, again, we talked about this before, and we talked about it in previous videos. You can't finish chapter 1 until you've finished the book. Well, the first draft anyway. And the reason being is, like right now, as I'm going along, I'm making notes because I know that when I get to the second draft, I'm going to be filling in these plot lines, working on peripheral plot lines. Some of them are, well, being a murder mystery, the detectives are investigating various avenues. Some of them will be dead ends. Some of them will be, you know, the kind of fade into nothing and then come back again and cross with the main thread of the plot in the end for the big reveal, which won't be what anyone expects will be. That's the really fun part of these kinds of books. Also, too, as I go along, I'll be fleshing out the characters. Their dialogue is being hammered out, the different things that they do, the different things that they say. But as we go along in future drafts, I'll be focusing on the various characters and developing their personalities, a lot of their language, a lot of their motivations and so forth. And a lot of that will start to come to light more and more as we go along from draft to draft to draft. Also, in this process, I'm making notes because I will be going through future drafts, setting up foreshadows. When I wrote the first chapters of this first draft, I knew where the story was going to go, more or less. I had a roadmap and I knew where I was headed, but there are little nuances that I want to work in. And now that I know where it's going to go and the different characters, especially some of the peripheral ones, I can start working them in at the beginning of the story to flesh out some of the plot with some red herrings maybe, or maybe clues for the armchair detective reading the story. Also, I'm going to be developing the whole atmosphere of the story as well. It takes place in Russia, and there are a lot of things about Russia, about Moscow, where most of the story happens, that I'm researching and studying. Never been to Moscow. I've been to Moscow, Vermont. Yeah, there is a Moscow, Vermont. It doesn't look anything like Red Square. It's a lot smaller. But anyway, working out some of the details, some of the street names, some of the businesses, the hotels, various chase scenes, where do they go, you know, that sort of thing. So that when somebody reads it, if they do know the city, it'll make sense. If they don't know the city, there'll be a certain logic and procedure to the whole thing that will make sense to them as well. So that's all very important, all of that research. And all of this stuff that I'm doing right now and all that I will be doing as I go along in this process is all contained in these videos. And if you've watched them once, you can watch them again, and you can watch them again and again and again. My apologies for the the quality of it. This isn't Hollywood. As you can see, this is just my studio, a cramped little space that we're using a little corner in to do these videos. And well, it's the nuts and bolts that's important, not how pretty it is. So I'm certainly hopeful that as you go through this whole thing, these videos, it's going to be a big help for you to get your project finished. Now, when we did these seminars a few years ago, we met a lot of frustrated people who have been writing. Some of them have been hammering away at the first couple of chapters for months, maybe even years, and really didn't know how to move on from there. So a lot of them, you know, some of them took notes. We handed out notes, which was helpful for a lot of people, with some illustrations. But we heard back from a few people, and I read Carl's testimonial at the beginning of this video. Also got one from a woman named Marcy Heath Robitaille, who attended one of our seminars, I think the one we had in Barrie, if I'm not mistaken. But at any rate, this is her book. She succeeded in getting it published, finished it, took our advice about eye contact on the cover and so forth. And it's a very heartfelt book, by the way. It's basically based on a true life story in her family. And she wanted to get it all down on paper because the story is a huge inspiration to anyone who might read it. And so she was really motivated to get this done, and we helped her make that happen. Talk about making her dream come to pass. So if you've got a good idea for a story and you're just chafing at the bit to get it down, then we're here to help you. I want you to feel free to get in touch with me. If there's an awful lot of information in these videos. I think there's 15 or 16 of them. Anyway, however many of them that there are. And if that's not enough and you get stuck, if you need some sort of a tip to get you off the dime, to get the next hurdle jumped over, please feel free, drop me an email, and I will do my best to answer you with some sort of wisdom. But I will answer you, and I'll help you work out whatever it is you need to get through. So I want to see your book get published. And if you think of it, when it happens, maybe send me a link or drop me a note. Tell me, hey, Bob, my book is done, and here's where you can see it on Amazon. And that way I can maybe pick up a copy so I can add it to my my bookshelf full of success stories. Anyway, so take advantage of these free videos, and again, thank you for paying attention to all of this stuff. I hope it's been helpful, and I'm author Bob Pierce from the studio.